Hey, it's Tim here. In today's video, I'm going to do something different. We're going to look at Snowflake. I'm going to show you how to load data from S3, that's Amazon's storage service, into Snowflake. And I'm going to show you everything that I learned along the way because I'm currently learning Snowflake and I'm finding it's a little bit tough. It's not like what I'm used to with Tableau Prep and Alteryx. So I'm also going to show you a few things that I've added to the process that people typically wouldn't do to make some bits of this more familiar for people who do use those visual tools. Let's get stuck in. We're going to be doing a lot of SQL on screen. I'm going to try and go really slowly so you can follow along. I'm going to be using lots of arrows and annotations. And if you have any questions or feedback about my pacing or anything like that, leave it in the comments below. Now, all the warnings are in. Let's get stuck in. So what I've done is I've already written some comments in my worksheet. I'm using the Snowflake interface. This is called Snowsight, the new interface that they recently launched. And I've gone ahead and essentially commented what we're going to need to do for this whole entire process. I find this useful because it allows you to plan everything you want to do, and it makes sure that you have this sort of high level view of what you're trying to achieve, and it makes you think about things a little bit more. The other thing that I've done is I've already got some items in an S3 bucket. You can see them here, customer1, customer2, and customer3.csv. These are CSV files. CSV stands for comma separated values. Essentially, it's a text file with commas separating the data. Except for in this instance, there's not actually commas separating the data. I've got pipes separating the data. And I'll explain why when we get to that section of the video. As ever, this video has timestamps, so you can skip ahead and watch whatever bits you're not familiar with. And I'll try and make sure that that's as detailed as possible so you can rewatch or watch the section you're interested in as well. Let's head back into Snowflake and let's start by writing some SQL. So the first thing we need to do is to actually create some structure. The reason we want to do this is just to make sure we're loading the data into the right place so that you can maybe start to understand some best practice about how to go about doing this. So I'm going to assume that you haven't even got a database set up, and we're going to go ahead and create them right now. So I'll just go ahead and create a database. I'll actually use a create or replace command because what a create or replace does is it replaces the database if it already exists. So we'll go ahead and do that. And you can see that Snowsight here auto-completes. So you can just go ahead and write everything and it tends to want to auto-complete for you. Sometimes it doesn't do that. You want to sort of, pay attention as you're typing to make sure you do things correctly. So we're just going to create or replace a database. We'll call this let's call this, what should we call this? I never know what to call this. I'll call this staging. I'll just call this database staging for whatever reason. That's a bad name because staging is a term we use in databases anyway, but I'll call it staging. That's it. So let's go ahead and just run that query. So let's just go ahead and do that. And you'll see that that's been created successfully. If you want a visual identifier that's worked, what you can do is you can go over here to the databases column, refresh that view. And if we go and refresh this, just make sure it's been created, you can see that staging is right there. And the other thing to notice is when I run that query, the context for Snowsight changed to this public space. So public is a schema that's created by default inside of staging. So if I go to staging, if I just go over here, you can see that public is actually referring to this schema here. There is another schema. This is called the information schema. This is also created by default. This is where Snowflake stores its information, but the public schema is just created by default. Now, because we want to load data into a particular place, the public schema tends to be where we store our actual data, the customer data that we're going to be loading from the CSV. What we want to do is potentially create another place for loading staging information. So we can go ahead and actually create a schema for external staging. So let's go ahead and create or replace. And this time we're going to type in schema. A schema is just another way of organizing a database. Think of it as a different aisle or a different section of the library. The library is the database. The aisle or the section is the schema. And the particular tables are shelves or aisles in a particular library. So we'll go ahead and create a schema and we'll call it external. Okay. Now, the important thing to bear in mind here is the context that I'm in. Right now, I'm still currently in my public schema. So if I go ahead and create a schema here, what it's actually probably going to do is do this in the wrong place. So let me just go and make sure that I'm actually in the right place. I'm in staging, public. Yep, that's right. So let's go ahead and call this external underscore staging. Let's go underscore staging. We'll close that off and we'll run this. There we go. So schema external staging. And again, you'll see that the context has changed. Now we're in staging external underscore staging. And then the final thing is we want to actually create our external stage. And this is basically where we're going to actually load our data into when we go and get the data from S3. And then we'll copy from our stage into a database table that we can actually use inside of Snowflake to query the data. So for this one, we'll go ahead and do one more, create or replace stage. And for this one, I'm just going to call it AWS stage_stage. And again, you want to make sure you're doing this in the right place. We're going to be creating this stage. This is the context. One thing I did mention at the start is that I'm using something called my compute warehouse. This is just an extra small Snowflake instances. Warehouses in Snowflake are essentially responsible for computing power. They're not like your typical warehouse in a database setup. So don't get those two things confused. But we're going to go ahead and run this line here. And we're going to hit run. And there we go, we have our AWS stage. Now let's go ahead and refresh this left-hand side list. When we do that, you'll see everything that we've created. So you'll see that we've got our staging database. We've got the external staging schema. This is the schema we created for staging information. When we expand that, you'll see that we have a bunch of tables, views, and if I go down to the stages section, you can see that we have our stage. So we're pretty much good to go. We're pretty much set up. Everything is set up as we'd like to. Now, for the next stage, what we want to do is to try and add some context to that stage, because at the moment we created a stage, but we didn't tell Snowflake where to go get the data from. And if we look at the documentation for creating a stage, if I just go back up here, you see that I was looking at it right before I recorded this video. What I always do with the Snowflake documentation, a little hack, is I just go all the way to the examples, because I find the documentation is almost so detailed that the upper parts tend to be only useful when you're really stuck. So I go to the documentation, I look at the examples first to see how it should be done. And from the examples, I tend to get a better feel for what I need to be doing. And while we're here, you'll see this sort of explanation of internal stages versus external stages. Now, an internal stage is essentially a stage that is familiar with Snowflake. So this is a stage where data is being held inside of Snowflake itself. An external stage is essentially data that comes from an external source. In this case, it could be Amazon S3, Azure, or Google Cloud Platform. We're getting data from S3. And you can see here that it's actually quite simple. We just need to do this step, create my external stage, and we need to give it a URL. This is where I copied my S3 URI, and you just need to tell it where that information is. Now, if you've got any other sort of complicated security settings, you can see other examples here. For example, if you want to add credentials for AWS, you can absolutely do that. You can also add things like encryption. And as you get more and more complex, you'll need to add more and more to your setup. In essence, in real terms, if you're working in an enterprise setting, likelihood is you're going to be using encryptions, credentials, and a bunch of other information. So this is absolutely what you're going to be needing to do. But because we're just doing a very simple example to show you the overall process, we're actually just going to need the URL. Why? My AWS bucket is public, so it doesn't have any security whatsoever. I'll delete it after this video so you can't go and download the data from it and create an S3 bill for me. But in essence, my S3 bucket is public, so Snowflake can just see it right from the get-go. We don't need to do any security to make it available to Snowflake. So you can see here that I have my S3 URL just right there. I got that from S3 itself. You can see that I copied it from this top right-hand side section just over there. And once you copy that, you can just come in here and paste it. So we'll just go ahead and we'll actually edit the initial statement we made. So let's just go and do this, and we'll say URL equals, and this is known as a string. So a string is just basically a piece of text, and you normally put speech marks on either side of it. Oh, you can see that I've got something else that I tried to do just before this video. So let's go ahead and grab this and paste that in there instead. Perfect. And now we can go ahead and close that with a semicolon. What this will do is actually go and get the information from S3. And then what we can then do is ask Snowflake to tell us what it knows about the metadata that it's got from that particular location. So because we've already created a stage, this time when we go and run this query again, what it will actually do is replace the stage with my new stage, which is also called AWS stage, this time with the right information. So let's go ahead and run that. You can see it's compiling, and now we have a stage. It's pretty much good to go. Okay, so now that we have the stage, what you might want to do is get some information about it, try and understand what it looks like, what kind of metadata does Snowflake have about the stage. And this is a good way of making sure that everything has worked as it should do. So there is a command. Let me just look at my notes here. Yes, that's correct. So there's a command here where we can just go ahead and write DESC. This is short for describe, but it's not the same as describe. I don't know why, but we can just go ahead and describe, and we can say the stage, and then we can ask it to literally describe the stage we've just been talking about. Now, because we are already in the right context here, we don't need to really specify where the stage is. So we can just go ahead and just call AWS_stage. You can see that it auto completes that, and we can go ahead and put a colon on that. And if we run that, this should hopefully work. Yeah, there we go. We get the metadata for that stage. So we essentially have some information. We have the file format right at the top. If we go down, we have a field delimiter. It's assuming that it's a comma. I know for a fact that it's not. So we'll come and address this later. I deliberately created CSV files with a slightly different delimiter, and I'll show you that soon. If you come down here, you can see a few other bits of information. For example, some copy options, some file information. If we had any AWS keys or credentials, those would also be down here. So you can see that that's worked perfectly. It's connected to our data in S3, and we're pretty much good to go. The last thing we can do is just ask if we can see the files that are currently in that stage. So what we can do is we can go just say list. This is basically what we're going to do. And for this one, we can actually just use this notation at AWS_stage. And we can just go and do underscore there, put the colon, close that off. And what we should do is see the 3 files. So you can see the 3 CSV files are good. Now, a mistake I made in my understanding was that assuming that size meant the number of rows. Size has got nothing to do with rows. It's actually the physical size of the file. So 34 kilobytes. This is all in bytes, so 34,000 bytes is 34 kilobytes. We know that because if we go to S3, you can see here that it says 34.1 kilobytes. The reason those might be different is because of file spacing, essentially. When you have different bits of information stored on different types of storage devices, you have sometimes compression, you sometimes have file sizes that change for minute distances. The best example is Windows. If you go look on Windows, you ask it how big's your hard drive, it will tell you. And then you ask it how much is available, it won't give you the same number. It kind of compresses that number and does weird things. So that's just an explanation of why those two might not be exactly the same in the 2 places. So now that we've created our stage, we've loaded our data, we've seen our data is there. You can see the CSV is there as well. One thing that I got really frustrated with actually in the whole process, and I get frustrated with SQL a lot, it's probably why I've avoided learning it as much as I have, is because I can't see what's going on, and I'm having to visually sort of work with it. So if something like Alteryx or Tableau Prep is your tool, I can totally understand why that is. But here, what I want to be able to do is recreate some of that experience. I want to be able to see what my data looks like. I've already got a file here. I've got 3 files, in fact. I should be able to preview the data so I know what to do next, because if, for example, I know, for example, the delimiter is different, it's actually a pipe, but it's been saved as a CSV. So how do I know that that's the problem? How do I identify that? Well, there's a couple of things you can do. And one of the really powerful capabilities of Snowflake is you can actually query this file in situ. So you don't have to load it into Snowflake to query the data. You can actually query it directly in Amazon S3. And that allows you just to give you a little bit of a feel of what's going on. So let's figure out how to do that. Now, there's a couple of ways of doing this. And I kind of had to sort of, it wasn't hard. I had to sort of find a way of, kind of getting to this answer. And I found this this solution here. This is a documentation. Everything's in the documentation for the record. Nothing I'm doing is, like life-changing. This is all well documented. So you could do this too. I'll put a link to all of this in the description as well. If I go down here, you'll see that there's a bunch of different examples. But if I go to the examples that I, hold dearly, you can see that there's this sort of example here. And this is really good because it actually breaks out the whole thing. So what it does is, look, you can create or replace a file format. And you're wondering, why do I need to create a file format? Well, it's because it makes the subsequent steps a little bit easier. You see here, you've got the stage. We've already done that, so we don't need to put anything in the stage. We can already sort of almost disregard these 2 steps. But this is where I got really interested, because here you can see there's something really interesting going on. And I'm actually going to explain this in a slightly weird direction. You don't really explain this from the beginning, because first you need to identify that you're working with a stage, and that's what we've got here. So for us, this is called AWS stage. Now, the next thing you can see is you've got this sort of brackets that goes all the way up to here. And what's going on in that space that I've highlighted is essentially you're specifying a file format, and you're also specifying which files to go and get using regex. So this particular part of this code is regex, essentially describing how the file should look like. So this is basically saying, go and find any file that has the term data.csv.gz. GZ is just a compression format. So GZ means .gz. So just a compression format. GZ means .gz. Sounds like I'm talking about Kanye West or something, but nonetheless, that's just saying, look, use regex to find files that look like this. This first part is saying file format is equal to or greater than my format, whatever. Okay, and my format is actually been specified up here. You see, the file format is specified ahead of time. Okay, and so my question is, well, how can you specify a file format if you can't see what's in the file to know what delimiter to use? That was just one of these things that had me in the loop. So you'd have to have access to the file. You'd have to have access to the information to look inside to know that you need that delimiter. But what if you didn't have access to that? What if you didn't know that? Well, it turns out that this still works perfectly fine. You see, if you just omit this file formatting capability, you can essentially just query the stage with just a single column. And so now if I explain this to you, what you're essentially doing is you're just running a normal SQL query, select start from, but in this case, you're specifying the columns. And you're probably wondering, well, what does T.$1 mean? T.$2? Well, the best thing to do is to describe this T here at the very end. This is known as an alias. In essence, we're basically saying, call my AWS stage T, and from T, I would like to get column 1 and column 2. So in essence, what this is saying is select column 1 and column 2 from my stage. The file format is this. It needs to match this pattern from regex, meaning it has to have data.csv in it. And the alias for the table is T. Now, if I change that alias to C, say for whatever reason I change this to C, then this would be C.$1 and C.$2. I don't know why I said pound sign. That's completely the wrong sign. So C.$1 and C.$2. So hopefully I've sort of explained that well. And all you're doing is calling the columns in essence, and that's how it works. Okay, so let's go back to our Snowflake instance. And actually what I'm going to do, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to be very, very bad here. I'm just going to copy this because I don't want to get this wrong whatsoever. So I'm just going to paste it here because we can kind of see this working, and we can just go ahead. And for now, we're just going to remove this because again, I want to query my stage so I know what file format and delimiter to use, because how can I see the file? Let's say I don't have access to the file. How can I see it here? So let's go ahead, and what I'm going to do is remove this pound sign. You see, the reason I'm doing that is because I don't know how many columns I need. So it makes sense to start with just one column and see what I get. And if we go ahead and replace at my stage 1 with at AWS_stage, you get this. So we have a very simple query. We're querying in the external stage. Everything is set up correctly. So hopefully, fingers crossed, this should work, and we can just hit run. You can see it's compiling. Now, what I should have done is put a limit. If you're ever doing this in a database, let's say someone's giving you an S3 bucket with billions of rows as hundreds of files, don't do that, because that will cost you a lot of money on Snowflake if you do that really badly. But nonetheless, here you can see it worked. It worked really, really well, and it just returned one column. Okay. Now, what happens if you try 2 columns? Let's go ahead and do T $2 for the second column. Let's try that again. Hit run. When we do that, you'll see it returns the second column, but the second column is null, which means it wasn't able to find it. And the reason, well, you can see that my CSV file, at least all 3 CSV files, I think in this case, it's loaded 3,000 rows. There were 3 files, so it has actually loaded all 3 CSVs. I know there's 1,000 rows in each of those files because I created them in Mockaroo which has a maximum limit of 1,000 rows, sorry, when a free account. So I can, let me move this. Oh, let's not do that. Let's move this up here. Oh, I don't want it to get in the way of the run button. So I think I'll leave it there. So you can see here, we've got the pipe delimiter. Okay, so now I can see the data. I know what's going on. I can even see what column names I might need to use and what data types I might need to use now that I can see the data. So now that we've got this, we can see here that we need to use a a pipe sign as the delimiter. So now we need to create a file format. So let's go ahead and create a file format. Now I'm not going to get the code for this correctly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this, okay? I'm going to grab this, which is essentially, it's actually quite straightforward. I could even type it, create or replace. And I think this is file format. I never know how you would know this, if that makes sense. I don't know why file format isn't one word. I don't know how they come up with this, but anyway, file format, create or replace file format. And now we need to give it a name. So in this particular case, I'll call this CSV with, what should we call this? CSV underscore pipe. Okay, so CSV with the pipe delimiter in essence. And what we're going to do is we're going to specify that that format's called CSV underscore pipe, and the type is equals to, and for this you need to do this, CSV. And then the next thing we also need to do is specify what field delimiter we're going to use. So field, now this one, oh my word, I have no hope of spelling delimiter right. I have slight dyslexia, so this is not my, this is like the worst thing I could be doing, trying to type the word delimiter out. Field delimiter equals, and for this one, what you need to do is just put the pipe in there. So that's the pipe character to tell the tool that this is the file format. And the other thing you can notice here, because we can see the data, we now know that we need to skip the first column. I don't want to import that first row as data because it contains headers. We can actually specify this when we create the table itself inside of Snowflake when we load the data in. So let's go ahead and actually specify that we're going to skip the first row. And the notation for that is essentially a Boolean field. All you're going to do is just say skip, let's say skip. You see, it doesn't come up, so I don't know how on earth you're supposed to know that. So skip header equals a 1. So if it wasn't skip header, if skip header wasn't on, it would be 0. That's it. That's just a 1 or a 0 for that field. And then we can do that. So let's just double check this. Create or replace file format, CSV, pipe. The type is a CSV file. The field delimiter is a pipe. And skip the header equals 1. Essentially skip the first row. Okay. So I think that's pretty much it. Let's go ahead and run this. We should see a success. So CSV pipe is now created. That means we can now specify a file format very, very easily. If I look at this notation, you can see here, this is the documentation for file format. If I go down to the examples, you can actually do quite a few things with the file format setup. So you can go ahead, specify a field delimiter, skip header, null if, essentially specifying what to do for if there's any null information, empty field as null equals true, compression if you want to specify that as well. All of that is in there, and it works with JSON as well. So it's a really nice sort of capability to be able to save those file formats, then call on them anywhere you're writing SQL. So that's really sort of a really handy trick to be aware of. Okay, so let's go back here and let's go to the next row. So what we've done so far, if I just sort of do a recap, we've created our database, we've created a stage, we've created a schema as well. We've described our stage to make sure it's there. We've listed the files in our stage. We've even queried the stage itself to have a look at the data and see what it looks like. We found that there was just one column with information, and in that column we had one long piece of text with a delimiter separating the information. So we've still only got one column, but we've got information separated by pipes. That's our delimiter. What we're going to do is use a transformation to essentially break that out into columns, essentially split the columns as it were. And then what we've done is we've gone and specified that particular file format as a format. So here CSV pipe is going to be my file format, and that's what I'm going to use in the next few steps. So it's taken a while to get here, but I thought it was important to sort of really give you a thorough overview of how I've got here, because I had no clue, and I spent best part of a couple of hours trying to figure it out using a bunch of SQL from lots of different places. So Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to be very naughty. I'm actually going to copy this because I'm really lazy. I hate repeating things. Because now that we've created our file format, what we can actually do is use that file format in our next step. And for our next step, what I'm going to do is write my SQL in a very weird way. I'm not going to write it all in one line. I'm actually going to create this space because that T is still going to remain our alias. We're still going to call everything with that. But this time, what I can actually do is tell the query what my file format should be. And to do that, I can just go ahead and create a brackets. Essentially what the bracket does is it almost passes an instruction to this query, and it tells it to treat the data in a slightly different way. So for this one, I can just go ahead and say file underscore format equals, and then this time, instead of saying CSV, I can just go and say CSV pipe equals CSV pipe. So let's go ahead and do that. CSV underscore pipe. Okay. And that basically means that the instruction I'm passing here is going to assume all of this information here. Okay. And now that we've done that, that's it. That's all we need to specify. Now, when we run this query, you'll see something slightly different. Let's go ahead and run this and hope this works. Oh, something's broken. So here we go. Invalid argument. We have not done this correctly. Unresolved function. I think I need to change something in here. So let's see. Select T1, column 1 or column 2 from AWS stage. File format, CSV pipe for table. The table function argument is required to be constant. I think what I've done here is, I don't know why, but I think I need this. If you know why I need that particular greater than sign or whatever, let me know. I think that's what it's missing. I can't believe that. Like, that's so annoying. But hey, look, this has worked because you see now, previously, when we ran this query, we got everything in one column. But now you can see here that T1 and T2 bring out all the individual fields. So I can actually kind of go crazy here, and I can just copy these, and we can just change these. I can copy these twice because I believe there were 6 rows. So we can go 2, we can call this 3, we can call this 4, call this 5, call this and 6. That's it. That's everything we need. We don't need that last comma. So we can go ahead and call these 6 columns from our AWS stage using this file format. Let's go ahead and select that. And here we go. This might take a bit longer, but no, there we go. There we have it. So we have our 6 columns, and now we are ready to load some information. Actually, we don't have a 6th column, so we can get rid of that final one there. It was just 5 columns. And we're pretty much good to go. Okay, so far so good. The next thing we're going to do is we need to actually start loading our data into a stage. And there's a couple of ways we can do this. Now that we know our data is there, we know what it looks like, we've sampled it, we know there's 3,000 rows, we know exactly what to expect. So we can actually, let me get rid of this. This is a bit confusing here because we don't need this. We've actually already used our stage, so we don't need that there. What I'll do actually is I'll take it and I'll put it up here where we need it. And then what I'll do is I'll leave this in GitHub so you can grab this and have a look at it and replace it with your own code. So let's go ahead here and have a look at the next step. So loading data into stage from S3. We've kind of already done this. This should, I didn't really observe what was going on with my notation. So we're still on the process for loading data. So now that we can see our data, we know what needs to be done. Now, you've got to think about this in a couple of different ways. Even this step here, previewing the data in the stage, I've actually kind of already done this here. So let me just put that there for now. Loading the data and previewing the stages there. For this next step, what we need to be able to do is we need to create a table to load our data into, because at the moment, we've got nowhere to load something into. So first, we need to create the table. So for this, because we can see our data, it should be a lot easier to go ahead and do that. And the trick here is to make sure that we get the context correct, because we're not going to load the data into our external staging. We're not going to load it into staging. We might actually load it into the public space. Okay, so we need to almost switch context here and go to a different place. So let's go ahead we can actually stay in staging and just go to the public schema here. And now that we're in the public schema, we can go ahead and create a table. We can go ahead and create a table. Okay, and the create table function is quite a straightforward one. Let me just double check my notes. Basically what we need to do is specify the name of the table. We're already in public, so let's go ahead and call this customer underscore table for now. And to make sure we get this correct, we need to specify the columns correctly. So what I'll do is I'll just put this over there, and I'll put a colon at the end of that so that we know that that's correct. Then we'll actually need to start specifying our columns. And this is quite straightforward because we can just go ahead and type them in. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to, I was going to copy it over, but I'll type it for the benefit of everyone. So we'll say ID is integer. So we have whole numbers for the IDs. So we'll just go int. The next thing is going to be the first name, I believe. So what it doesn't help is that I skipped the first header. So what I can actually do is I can actually go here, just run this again. This won't work because I'm in the wrong context. So let's go back here and go to external stage, run this. We'll get the right table below. It's still bringing two columns. So we got first name, last name, favorite app, and favorite color. So that's good to know. Let's go back, go to public, get that context correct. Now we're in public. We can keep on writing here with that preview right below. So that's the first one. The next one is going to be first underscore name. Next one, I'll do this first, last underscore name. I will call this favorite underscore app. We'll call this favorite underscore color. I'll do the American way for now. And for the data types, we're going to be using characters for all of these ones. So we just go ahead and type, I think it's varchar. I always remember it as like a Pokemon, varchar. I don't know what that is. So varchar. I think it just means variable character, actually. It's one of these things that you just see a lot and you don't ever get it right. Everything here is going to be a variable character. I'm not going to specify the size or anything like that. We can kind of worry about that kind of stuff later. So there we go. We've got all our columns set up. I believe that's everything. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That looks pretty good to me. I can't see any other bits of information that we need. It looks about right. I think the only thing, I feel like I'm missing something. Definitely missing something. So let's go back into my create table. Okay, yes, I knew I was missing something. You need to put a comma after each one but the last one. So let's go ahead and do that. This is what's missing. Let's go and do that. And the last one doesn't need it. So we're in public. We're going to create the table called customer table. Let's go ahead. Oh, this is not right. Good spot. Let's go ahead and run this. There you go. Customer table was successfully created. So you need to also get in the habit of checking your work before you run things. And we can kind of validate that here by hitting refresh. Going to public, let's go to public, go to tables, and you can see the customer tables right there. And you can even see the columns have all been loaded. So ID, first name, last name, favorite app, favorite color. Those are all stored in there. Now, the fact that we've done that means we now have a table we can work with. We're now ready to copy some data into that table. So let's go ahead and do exactly that. Now, to do that, we use something called the copy into command. And you can use the copy into command in a couple of different ways. If I go down again to our lovely examples, let's go here to a named external stage. So here you can say, for example, you can actually load the data directly from, loading files directly from an external location. So copy into my table from S3 bucket. Right. So here you can actually specify how to load it into a particular table. Although everything I've done here, we've already been querying it. So you're probably wondering, well, I already sort of have the data. Well, this query here is actually performing a transformation on the information. What I'm going to do when I load it in is actually apply that transformation at the point when I'm loading it. So even though I've done it up here, it's going to look a bit different. But there is also another way of loading data that allows us to just use this information straight from the get-go. And it's essentially a copy into my table from this select statement. and that will actually do the transformation as well, because it's essentially the exact same piece of information. So what I'll do is I'll show you both ways that we can do that. So let's go ahead and grab this. I'm really bad with my annotations. I did not stick to them at all. I think it's because my head is just running ahead of the tutorial. So we'll go ahead and close that. So the last item here is to load it into the table. So what I'll do is I'll start by typing the copy into command. Let's just do that, okay? And copy into, and we're going to call this customer table. So customer table is already been created. Now, for this step, we've got two ways of doing it. Now, the first way, we can basically take the data from our staging and load it in. And the other way is to essentially just use our select statement. Now, this sort of seems like almost bizarre to me, but you can just essentially do this. And this is by far the quickest way, given how I've shown you this so far. So we can say copy into table, and I'll just say from. And then what you need to do is almost put two brackets. Okay, and I'm just going to close that by doing this. And then inside of this from, you need to basically go and get this select statement. You can copy that because we've done the work already. Okay, and then paste that in there. So what that's going to do is saying copy the data into this table from this query that I've got going on, which is already calling a piece of information from a stage. And so that will mean that we can then go ahead and just load this up. So I believe this will work. I really hope it works. I think it will work. Let's go ahead and try that. Oh, there was an error. So what is the error? So, it's because I think I've got this and it shouldn't be there. I don't need that there because it's actually over here. So because I copied it before, it kind of got that wrong. So this is great. This is a great error. Staging.public.aws stage that does not exist or is not authorized. So what it's doing, what it's basically telling me is that, hey, over here in staging, in the public schema, I don't see an AWS stage. So what the hell are you talking about? Well, that's because here I've just referred to at AWS stage, but of course my context is public. So what I really need to do is specify that I need to load the data from this other location. So we're going to have to just go ahead and spell it out for the tool to understand what's going on. So what we'll do here is we'll call staging database, and we'll call external stage, which is the schema. And then we'll say AWS _ stage. Okay, so that's basically us specifying that, hey, this thing you're going to load is from another place in the system. So let's go ahead and try that now. We'll go ahead and run that. And this time we get a slightly different error. So a syntax error, line 5 at position 0, expected a close bracket. So what is going on here? File format, there's a close bracket. Let's try this. Let's try putting this here. Let me also do this because I'm losing track of what's going on. Let's just make it easier to see. So if I do this as well, then we can see that this closes there, that closes there, that closes there. Interesting. Let's go ahead and run that. Nope. Position line 4 at position 33. Well, line 4 is 1, 2, 3, 4. Position 33. It expected another bracket. I'm fairly confident this is correct. I think I might have another issue elsewhere here. So let's go and look at the copy into documentation. This is what we should do. So in here, they don't give you an example where they're using see all of these. Maybe it suggests you shouldn't be trying to do this. Maybe I got too ahead of myself. I got it working in one situation and then I didn't get it working in another. What are we looking for here? So copy into from, what am I missing? I bet it's something tiny. When we queried the data, we queried it from at, this might be it. So it's really obvious, but of course this query works with an at sign. So let's I hope this isn't it. I hope this is not what I'm looking for. If that is it, I'll be furious. Let's go ahead and nope, CSV pipe does not exist or is not authorized. Did I create the file format in a different context? I might have done. So let's go and see if file formats are. Nope. No, I don't believe so. If I go in here, nope. Okay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to try something cheeky. Let's see if we can create this file format, but we're going to create it in this context of public to see if that's potentially causing the issue. So let's go ahead. I'll put this here just for the fun of it. And because we're already in public, I'll go ahead and run this. Interesting. It uses a create or replace, so that might not necessarily mean that this has worked. So it's CSV underscore pipe, all lowercase. So now if I go write this, oh my word. So that was a really good bit of troubleshooting. So it looks like you have to create the file format specific to the schema. That's something new. And then the other thing you have to bear in mind here is that you have to reference the staging correctly. I got it right up here, and for some bizarre reason, I decided to change the way I was referencing it here. What I thought that the outside was doing was almost, it's like Twitter mentions. I was thinking too much about social media. I thought the outsign works globally. I'm incorrect in that specific instance because I felt like I had to call it directly. Let me, I wonder, let's try it something else. Let's just make sure we're absolutely clear about this. So let's say, let's create another table. We'll say customer V2. I'll just call this V2 and hit run on that. Okay, so we've created another table. We'll go ahead and refresh. We'll go down, we'll go to public. You'll see tables. You should see two tables, customer V2. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to get rid of this @ sign. And for this one, I'm going to say copy into table V2, customer table V2. The file format is already here, V2, table V2. Yep. Everything looks good. Let's go ahead and highlight that and run. And this time I'm going to see if it works without the @ sign. If hit run, no, we get an error. So you need the @ sign, irrespective of whatever you're going on. And otherwise it causes an issue here. I don't know why it causes an issue there when the issue is here. That makes no sense to me. But if I then go ahead and run that, it works. Okay, so a little bit of live troubleshooting. We've copied our data in. We've done it this way. You could do it another way. The other way that I thought of doing it is you can just basically go ahead and specify the transformation at the point at which you load. So the other way of doing this is to say, we can actually just do this. Let's say, let's create a V3 and show you that this works regardless. Go ahead and hit run. Good, table V3 has been created. We'll go ahead and copy this and we'll paste this over here. Call this V3. And then what you can say is from. And now this time, what you're going to do is you're going to do a slightly different notation for referencing the stage in the first place. Okay. So for this one, let me just double check my notes. What you want to do is make sure that you're basically going to say from, this is the stage. We're going to grab that. Okay. And what I'll do on a new line, what I should have actually done is this. I should have said copy into table from this stage. And then here you can specify the file format. So file format. I'll go ahead and copy this actually, because I think this is basically the same thing. So basically you're specifying the file format right here. And for this, you don't need this brackets. You can just go ahead and do that. And I'm pretty sure that's it. You just need to close this off. I think that's it. Let's go ahead and try this. If we get any errors, we'll try and debug it anyway and hit and see what happens. So, okay, we've got an error, file format. I think maybe I do need the brackets. Let's go ahead and check that. Go ahead and run that. Unexpected close brackets in line 46. So we don't need that. So what have I done wrong this time? Let's go and find out. I think potentially this information here needs to come in here. So rather than referencing my file format, which I handily prepared, I need to put this here. And I think if I reference this, I need to put brackets around this. So let's go ahead and do that here. Right, so I think this might be it. Let's go ahead and try this. Here we go. I have no clue why. It's almost terribly inconsistent. So up here, you put the brackets around, and out here, you put it around the file format. What I'm not clear about is why I couldn't just reference the file format directly. Or maybe I didn't do it right. Maybe I got something wrong and I didn't reference the file format correctly here. I would have thought that would have worked, but maybe you know what's the issue is. Let me know in the comments below. I think this video has been plenty long enough. We've done some live troubleshooting and we've actually got there a couple of different ways. So if I actually go ahead and refresh, you see that we've actually loaded 3 tables now with information, 1,000 rows. And of course, now we can actually just go and do a basically a basic query here just to show that this is done. Select star from customer table. We've got 3,000 rows. What do you want to choose? Go ahead, run that, and we should see a lovely table of information. Let it load. There we go. So there's our loaded data. We've been able to load that, and it's been hopefully an interesting lesson and journey for everyone who's watched this. Yeah, thanks very much for tuning in to the very end and watching even the troubleshooting. I think the troubleshooting is an important part because you kind of learn, I think you learn a lot by troubleshooting. Now, when I learned this for the first time, what was really interesting to me is that this whole middle section here was almost sort of not something that I saw a lot of people doing. They would create the stage and then they'd just go create the table, then they'd just go load it into the table. So we've done a few extra steps and we've actually used some of that information to help us do the loading. But hopefully you've seen all the different ways of doing stuff, writing different queries that help you do all of these things. And yeah, hopefully you've also learned something interesting and new. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. And by the way, if you've got any feedback, please let me know. I really, really appreciate it. There's a whole new different place. You know, when I'm showing Tableau or showing some visual tools, it's much easier for people to follow along. But when you're showing code, it's a completely different thing. So I would really appreciate any support and feedback that you can give to make these a little bit better. Do you like watching me troubleshoot live, or would you rather a completely polished video with no mistakes so you can sort of follow along more clearly? Let me know in the comments below. We'll find out what people think. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.